According to the Canadian Human Rights Commission, about 15% of the world's population live with disabilities. There is a significant likelihood, at least a 1 in 7 chance, that educators will encounter students with diverse needs in their classrooms. This presentation delves into disability and special education through the lens of the landmark Eaton case. We will explore themes of inclusion, discrimination, and the right to an appropriate and meaningful education. Understanding the legal and ethical frameworks guiding these themes is crucial for educators, policymakers, and anyone invested in equitable education. The Education Act and the Inclusive Education Policy are essential for ensuring that individuals with disabilities receive appropriate education. These policies emphasize tailoring education to each student's unique needs and fostering an environment where all students can succeed. This presentation provides a detailed analysis of these frameworks and their significance. The Eaton case explores barriers, rights, and educational policies affecting students with special needs. Often cited in legal contexts, the Eaton case serves as a pivotal reference for understanding disability and education. By examining this case, we will show you insights into the legal precedents affecting inclusive education and ongoing efforts to ensure all students receive an equitable and meaningful education. In 1989, Emily Eaton joined a group of classmates in Princess Elizabeth Public School in Brantford, Ontario. She had been diagnosed with cerebral palsy, a movement disorder which impairs or permanently damages motor function. She required significant accommodations to participate in educational activities. Initially, she was integrated into a regular classroom with the assistance of a full-time educational aide. However, as Emily progressed, the Brant County Board of Education decided that a specialized classroom would better meet her educational needs. They believed that this setting would provide structured support and specialized resources essential for her development. Emily Eaton was identified as an exceptional pupil by the Identification, Placement, and Review Committee, a subset of the Ontario School Board. After 3 years, the IPRC made the decision to switch Emily into a specialized class. Disagreeing with this decision, her parents argued that maintaining Emily in a regular classroom was in her best interest. They challenged the board's decision on the grounds of discrimination under Section 15 of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. They contended that removing Emily from the regular classroom environment constituted unequal treatment and discrimination on the grounds of her disability. Emily's case delves into the broader implications for inclusive education, highlighting the tension between individualized support and principles of inclusion. This case exemplifies the ongoing debate about the most effective and equitable education settings for students with disabilities. It raises crucial questions about how to best balance the need for specialized resources with the goal of inclusivity, and how to ensure that educational placements truly serve the best interests of the students with disabilities. Here are the facts of the case. The case is Eaton v. Brant County Board of Education. The court is the Supreme Court of Canada. The decision was made on March 21st, 1997. The appellant, Emily Eaton, was represented by her parents, Tammy and Stephen Eaton, and the respondent was Brant County Board of Education. The Supreme Court's decision in Eaton v. Brant County Board of Education hinged on a critical question. Did placing Emily in a special education class violate her equality rights under Section 15 of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms? This legal challenge demanded a delicate balance between principles of non-discrimination and the practical need to provide an education that met Emily's unique needs. The court's task was to determine if the placement decision intended to offer the best possible educational environment for Emily amounted to discrimination. The judicial journey of the case included several key stages. At the Ontario Special Education Tribunal, they initially upheld the board's decision to place Emily in a specialized classroom. The divisional court supported the tribunal's decision, finding no grounds for discrimination. At the Ontario Court of Appeal, they upheld the tribunal's decision, emphasizing that the decision was made in the best interests of the child. And the Supreme Court of Canada granted leave to appeal to examine whether Emily's equality rights had been infringed. The Court of Appeal's review of the Education Act's constitutional viability was flawed due to the lack of proper notice under Section 109. The Supreme Court highlighted the necessity of allowing the government to defend its laws, underscoring the principles of fairness and justice. The court highlighted the importance of considering the child's best interests in educational placement, agreeing that a specialized classroom was best for Emily's given needs. The core issue was whether placing Emily in a special education class constituted discrimination. The Supreme Court emphasized that not all distinctions based on prohibited grounds amount to discrimination, highlighting the need for reasonable accommodation. The Supreme Court ruled that placing Emily in a specialized classroom did not validate her equality rights. The court stressed that true equality requires recognizing and accommodating individual differences to achieve substantive equality. At the end of the day, the two bodies in argument here have the same goals. Emily's parents and the school board both want her to thrive with an education that she finds meaningful. The Supreme Court gave pause on the topic of charter rights, thoroughly combing over the evidence, eventually ruling that the placement did not constitute discrimination. The decisions of the school board were based on a comprehensive understanding of her best interests, not on stereotypical assumptions. The decision aimed to provide Emily with an optimal educational environment tailored to her unique needs. It also facilitated reasonable accommodations, allowing her better access to education tailored to her specific needs. The Supreme Court allowed the appeal, reinstating the tribunal's decision to place Emily in a special education class. This reflects the court's standing by the decisions of the previous judicial bodies, the Ontario CET, Divisional Court, and Ontario Court of Appeal. The Eaton case has significantly influenced how educational authorities approach inclusion and accommodation. Since the ruling in 1997, the case has been cited more than 400 times according to the Canadian Legal Information Institute. The most commonly cited sections of the case are as follows. Section 66, cited by 50 documents. The purpose of Section 15 of the Charter is not only to prevent discrimination by the attribution of stereotypical characteristics to individuals, but also to ameliorate the position of groups within Canadian society who have suffered disadvantage by exclusion from mainstream society, as has been the case with disabled persons. Section 67, cited by 48 documents. Exclusion from the mainstream of society results from the construction of a society based solely on mainstream attributes to which disabled persons will never be able to gain access. Whether it is the impossibility of success at a written test for a blind person or the need for ramp access to a library, the discrimination does not lie in the attribution of untrue characteristics to the disabled individual. The blind person cannot see, and the person in a wheelchair needs a ramp. Rather, it is the failure to make reasonable accommodation, to fine-tune society so that its structures and assumptions do not result in the relegation and banishment of disabled persons from participation, which results in discrimination against them. Not allowing for the condition of a disabled individual ignores his or her disability and forces the individual to sink or swim within the mainstream environment. It is recognition of the actual characteristics and reasonable accommodation of these characteristics which is the central purpose of Section 15 in relation to disability. On April 13, 2024, at the young age of 40, Emily Eaton passed away, and through her legacy, there has only been more advocacy for disabled people and inclusive education. As Canadian lawyer David Lepofsky said, the Eaton case is not just a court ruling, it is a powerful emblem of an entire cause. Emily's case laid the groundwork for much that followed after it. It helps to this day in so many ways. As just one example, it shows students with disabilities what they have been up against. This case emphasizes the necessity of reasonable accommodation and individualized approaches to disability, redefining equality under the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms to ensure equitable treatment tailored to each student's needs. Rulings in this case continue to profoundly influence inclusive education policies and practice across Canada. This case marks an important point in history for students with disabilities. As educators, we must reflect on our role in promoting inclusivity and upholding the rights of disabled students to ensure that every student receives an appropriate and meaningful education. By embracing the principles established in the Eaton case, we can work towards a more inclusive and equitable educational landscape. Finally, as we wrap up the presentation, I have 2 questions for you. 1. What criteria should be used to determine the best interests of students with disabilities in education settings? And for the second question, how can educational authorities monitor and evaluate the effectiveness of accommodations to ensure they effectively meet the needs of students with disabilities? Thank you for watching this presentation. The sources are linked here and in the description. There's just one more thing. Throughout the presentation, I emphasized that the rulings of this case have been utilized frequently in Canadian courts. I was curious about its connection with other case studies, so I did some research and found that the Helco v. British Columbia case cites Eaton. Section 356 of the court document says, "In that case, the court held that the wishes of the disabled child's parents that she attended an integrated classroom did not make the school board's placement of the child in a segregated setting discriminatory. The court held that the school board had carefully reviewed the needs of the child and determined that she would be better served outside the classroom." This case occurred almost 10 years later in 2006, and the precedents from the Eaton case are still being utilized to this day. Thank you very much.